Hi, in this lesson we're going to start working on percent. Percentages are something that we see everywhere. For instance, wage increases by 2% or discounts on percentages, or statistics are often done in percentages, whether it's sports or something else. Leaving a tip is often a percentage of the meal at a restaurant or a service. Mortgage rates or lending rates or line of credit or a car loan, often those are also done as percentages. So percent means actually literally per 100. So when you say 13%, it means 13 per 100 or 13 100ths, or the decimal 0.13. So these three things, 13%, 13 100ths, and 0.13, all mean exactly the same thing. So if you can start thinking in terms of how a percent is represented by a decimal or by a fraction, it becomes easier to think about what the meanings of them are and then also to start working with them in later modules. I'm going to just scroll down so we can take a look at this chart a second. So percentages, fractions, and decimals all mean the same thing and just look different from each other. So here are a group of percentages. So 7% is the same as 7 100ths, which is the same as 0.07, because remember, with the denominator of 100ths, we need to have two decimal places. The 23% and the 89% are a little bit easier. Again, we're putting the percent over 100, and then because there's two decimal places, 0.23 and 0.89. The 109% is interesting because it's greater than 100%. So it's like 109 100ths, which is the same as 1 and 9 100ths, which we would write as 1.09. So if you have more than or greater than 100%, means that you have a number that's greater than 1, okay? So greater than 1. 16.7%, we get decimals inside percent sometimes. Your first step in converting it to a fraction would still be to write it over 100, but we never leave a decimal in a fraction form. So if you look at the next step, what's happened is that we've multiplied the denominator by 10 to get 1,000, and we multiplied the 16.7 by 10 to get 167 1,000ths. That is the correct final form for doing the conversion. Multiplying by 10 with a decimal means you're just moving the decimal place to the right by one space. Multiplying by 10 in the denominator really means adding a 0. So this gives us a decimal with 3 decimal places, 0.167. Again, the next one is similar in that we have a decimal inside our percent. So our first step is to put that decimal over 100 and then multiply by 10 or multiply by more. If you have more decimal places in your percent, you're going to have to multiply by more. But in this case, we're multiplying by 10, which gives us a 1 in the numerator, 1,000 in the denominator, and 0.01 as our decimal form. 25% is the same as 25 100ths, which can be reduced to 1/4 or 1/4, which gives us the 0.25. Sometimes it's easier to go from a from a percent first to the decimal and then to the fraction, and it's up to you which order you want to do the conversions in. Sometimes it's easiest to do one first and then the other one, and you can make your choice as to which one you want to do. 80% is 80 100ths, which you can reduce, and you could reduce that in steps. You could say that's going to be 40/50ths, which would be 4/5, or you might start with 8/10 and then divide by 2. Just reduce your fraction as low as you can, and the decimal, though, goes back to this, the 80/100ths, 0.80. 150%, again, that's one that's greater than 100, so it's going to give me a number that's greater than 1. So it's 150/100ths, which is 1 50/100ths, or 1.5, or 1.50. And if you can do this in one step, going from 150% straight to the 1.5, that's fine. These steps are here, though, to show you that you can start by putting it over 1/100th, turn it into a mixed number, and then reduce the fraction, and then move to your decimal. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at percentages to decimals. So we've just had a couple of examples on that chart, so now let's do that. So to go from percent to decimal, we drop the percent sign and we slide the decimal place 2 places to the left, which is dividing by 100. So 68% becomes, if you think about where the decimal is in the number 68, even though it's not written, it's always after the last digit. So the decimal place goes from there, and we slide it 2 places to the left, so the decimal place is going to end up in front of the 6. So we end up with 0.68. 135%, again, drop the percent symbol and move the decimal to the left 2 spaces, gives us 1.35. And 15.9%, so there's already a decimal in there. We just take it and move it to the left 2, so we'll end up with 0.159. We don't always remember to put the 0 in front of a decimal, but it's a very good practice because it really highlights where the decimal is. It doesn't get lost off to the left of the number. Going the opposite direction from decimals to percent is just doing the opposite. We're multiplying by 100. We're moving the decimal to the right 2 spaces, so 0.52 is equal to 52%. 2.68 gives us 268%, and 0.743, remember we're just moving it 2 spaces, so it's going to end up between the 4 and the 3, so we have 74.3%. Now we're going to go from percentages to fractions or mixed numbers. Okay, so for A, 43%, we are dropping the percent symbol and just writing it as a fraction over 100. And then if it reduces, we'll reduce it, or if there's a decimal place in it, we adjust it so that there's no decimal in our final answer. So that just gives us 43/100ths. Question B, 65% gives us 65/100ths. And since I know that 5 goes into 65 and into 100, I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator by 5 and get 13/20ths. Question C, 108% gives me 108 over 100, or 1 8/100ths. And I want to reduce that, so I'm going to divide the numerator and denominator by 4, so I'll have 1 2/25. And now to give myself a little more space, question D asks for 7.9%. So we'll write that one. There's one of those decimal ones. That gives me 7.9 over 100. but I can't leave it like that. So I'm going to multiply by 10 so that I end up with 79 in the numerator and 1,000 in the denominator. And then it's in proper fraction form. Question E is similar because it's going to give me 0.6 1/100ths, okay, because it's 0.6%. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 10. So now I have 6 1,000ths. But I can reduce that because those are both even numbers. So I'm going to divide by 2, and that will give me 3 500ths once I reduce it to lowest terms. And our last question has every type of difficulty in it. It's 216.4%, so 216.4 over 100. So I can already write that as 216.4 over 100. But remember, we don't like the decimal there. And I see I have to scroll for just a little bit more space here. So that gives me 2 and 164 over 1,000. So I'm going to divide. I see that 4 goes into the numerator and the denominator. So I'm going to have 2 and 41 over 250 once it's in lowest terms. That one's tricky because of the simplifying the fraction, going to the 100, over 1,000 for the decimal and having a whole number in there. And we're going to also look at converting, equivalent fractions and decimals. And this is very similar to what we did in our last lesson, where 1/2 is the same as 0.5, which is the same as 50%. So this chart is also in your book. Notice with the fractions with a denominator of 3, remember we have 0.3 repeating, and we can do the same with a percent. So we could write out a few of those 3's so that we're moving over the decimal place, and we write that as 33.3 with a little bar above the 3, above the 3 to show that it's repeating. So 33.3 repeating percent. With the denominator of 4, we're going 25%, 50%, 75%, etc. And with a denominator of 5, we're doing 20%, 40%, 60%, and 80%. And that's the end of this lesson.